Commander Jack Harris stood tall in front of the grand table in the Galactic Council chamber, his eyes scanning the room full of alien representatives. The weight of the situation was heavy, but he did his best not to show it. His uniform, pressed and neat, contrasted sharply against the varied, colorful attire of the other delegates. This wasn't just any meeting. It was the meeting that could change humanity's place in the universe. The Aetheri, a race known for their advanced technology and ancient traditions, were asking for something unexpected, something outrageous. The Council had gathered because of Earth's growing presence in the galaxy. The Aetheri were hesitant about forming an alliance with humanity, but they were willing to consider it, on one strange condition. In the middle of the room stood Princess Sereth, the Aetheri royal and the heart of this political dilemma. With her long silver hair flowing down her back and her golden eyes gleaming like twin suns, she was a sight to behold. Her presence filled the room with tension. Her people valued tradition and honor above all else, and this request was one of the strangest yet. She had to share a bed with Jack Harris. It wasn't just a gesture of diplomacy. It was a ritual, a test to see if Earth could truly be trusted as an ally. Jack's mind raced as he listened to the Aetheri's explanation. The ritual was ancient, designed to create a bond between the two races. The princess and the human representative would share a night together, and in doing so, they would forge an unbreakable connection between their people. As the Aetheri Council members spoke, Jack remained silent, trying to process everything. His heart was pounding. He had been in countless dangerous situations, but none like this. The request wasn't just political, it was personal, and it put him in an uncomfortable position. Commander Harris, the lead Aetheri delegate, Thalrax, spoke again, his voice deep and commanding. You understand that this is not just a formality. It is a requirement. Should you fail to follow through with this ritual, Earth will not be considered for alliance. Our technology, our knowledge, will remain out of your reach. Your people will remain powerless in the face of the galactic threats to come. Jack swallowed hard. The stakes were high. Earth needed the Aetheri's technology. Without it, humanity might not survive the next war that loomed on the horizon. But agreeing to this, it felt wrong. He glanced at Princess Sereth, her eyes meeting his. She seemed calm, almost indifferent, but Jack could tell there was something more behind her gaze. Was this what she wanted? Was she truly willing to go through with it, or was she forced into it by her people? Then, without warning, she spoke. Her voice was soft, yet it carried across the room. You will share bed tonight, human. The words echoed in Jack's mind, and for a brief moment, the entire room fell silent. His gaze shifted from the princess to the other members of the council. The room was tense, but he could see the approval in their eyes. This was a test for him, too, not just of his leadership, but of his character. How far was he willing to go for his people? How much could he sacrifice for the future of Earth? Jack felt his stomach twist. He didn't want to be a pawn in some strange alien ritual. He didn't want to be a part of a deal that seemed more like a humiliation than an honor. But then he remembered the faces of the people back home, the citizens of Earth, who had no idea how close their world was to destruction. Every decision he made now would ripple out to affect billions of lives. Taking a deep breath, he spoke. I understand the request, and I will do what it takes for the sake of my people. But let it be clear that this is not a sign of submission. This is for Earth. We will stand together, no matter what you ask of us. There was a brief pause as the council members exchanged glances. Thalrax nodded in approval, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if Jack's response had earned him some respect. But it was Princess Sereth who caught Jack's attention again. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something. Was it relief? Or was it something else entirely? For the first time, Jack allowed himself to fully look at her. She was a princess, a royal, and yet there was something about her that felt different from the others in the room. Her eyes were filled with a strange sadness, and for a moment, Jack wondered if she too was trapped in this situation, just as much as he was. "I will see you tonight," Sarith said, her voice no longer cold but almost vulnerable. Jack nodded, his mind racing. The weight of this decision was heavier than any mission he had ever been given, but it was clear now that this wasn't just about politics. It was about something far deeper. The future of two species, humanity and the Aetheri, was at stake, and tonight it would begin with a single fateful choice. The door to Commander Jack Harris' quarters slid open with a soft hiss. He turned, expecting to find his assistant, but instead it was Princess Sarith, standing in the doorway. Her tall, elegant figure was framed by the light from the corridor, casting a long shadow on the floor. She stepped in silently, her golden eyes searching his face with an intensity that made Jack feel uneasy. "Commander Harris," she said softly, her voice quieter than before, almost pleading. "May I speak with you?" Jack's mind raced. The meeting earlier had left him confused, angry, and conflicted. He had never imagined that a situation like this would arise. A formal political alliance was one thing, but a ritual involving the princess. It felt like something out of a strange dream. He nodded slowly, motioning toward the seating area in the corner of the room. "Please, have a seat," Jack said, his voice calm despite the chaos in his mind. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had agreed to the ritual out of necessity for Earth's survival, but now he wasn't sure what he had truly agreed to. Sarith moved gracefully across the room, her footsteps almost soundless. When she sat down across from him, her expression was no longer as cold as it had been during the earlier meeting. Instead, there was something almost human in her eyes, a vulnerability Jack hadn't expected. "I didn't want this," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did not choose this path. You must understand, Commander, that my people will not accept any alliance with Earth unless this ritual is completed. It is the way of my people, a test of strength, a bond forged in the fires of tradition." Jack stared at her for a moment, trying to process her words. Her tone was sincere, and for the first time, he could see the fear in her eyes. She was not some cold, heartless royal. She was a person, just like him, caught up in forces beyond her control. "You don't want to go through with this," Jack said, his voice gentle but firm. It wasn't a question. He could see it in the way she avoided his gaze and how she clenched her hands in her lap. She wasn't as sure of this as she led on. "No," she admitted, her eyes dropping to her hands. "I don't, but there is nothing I can do. I am the heir to the throne. My people expect me to follow the ancient traditions to ensure the survival of our civilization. Without this alliance, our people could fall into ruin. We need Earth's technology, their strength. And I am supposed to be the one to make it happen." Her voice trembled slightly at the last words, and Jack could sense the weight she carried. He hadn't realized just how much pressure she was under. To be a leader in such a powerful yet fragile empire must have been incredibly difficult. The Aetheri were proud, but they were on the brink of collapse, struggling to balance their ancient customs with the realities of a changing galaxy. Jack took a deep breath, trying to think of the right words. He had always prided himself on his ability to stay calm in stressful situations, but this was different. This was not about strategy or military tactics. This was personal. "Sarith," he said, using her name for the first time. "I understand your duty to your people, but don't you think there might be another way? A way where we don't have to follow traditions that seem unfair?" She met his gaze then, her eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, Jack thought she might speak, but instead, she hesitated. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I don't know," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "I am caught between two worlds. I have been raised to believe in these traditions, but now, I am not sure they are the right way. I was taught to serve my people, to put their needs above my own. But when I look at you, Commander, when I see the way you are so different, I begin to wonder, Are these traditions worth following? Are they worth sacrificing myself for? Jack felt a strange sense of connection to her in that moment. He had always believed that humans were capable of great strength, of great sacrifice, but he had never truly thought about it from another species' perspective. It wasn't just Earth he was fighting for anymore. It was a chance for Sarith to find a way out of this impossible situation too. I can't promise I'll be able to change your people's traditions, Jack said slowly, his mind working to find the right words. But I will help you find another way. You don't have to go through with this if you don't want to. There has to be another solution. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the silence thick and heavy. Finally, Sarith looked away, her eyes clouding with doubt. I wish there were another way, she whispered, almost to herself. Jack sat back, trying to figure out what to say next. He couldn't promise her a way out of the ritual, but he could offer his support. Maybe, just maybe, together, they could find a solution that didn't involve this ancient, uncomfortable tradition. Sarith's voice broke the silence once again. Thank you, Commander Harris. You may not realize it, but your words, they give me hope. Hope that I am not alone in this. Jack gave her a small, reassuring smile. You're not alone. We'll figure this out, together. The following day, the atmosphere aboard the ship felt even more charged than before. The meeting with the Galactic Council had been a tense affair, but now it was time for the real challenge. The grand diplomatic banquet was about to begin, and Jack Harris found himself once again face to face with the Athery and the princess. The large hall where the banquet was being held was decorated with intricate alien designs, each symbol and pattern carrying deep meaning for the Athery. The lights above flickered, casting long shadows on the floor as delegates from many different species mingled, exchanging polite words and cryptic glances. Jack's eyes scanned the room, trying to remain focused on the task at hand, even as the weight of the bonding ritual loomed over him. He had no idea how he would get through the evening. Sarith stood across the room, looking regal in her flowing silver gown. Her gold eyes shone brightly, and she was surrounded by members of the Athery Council, all whispering to one another. Jack could feel their eyes on him, judging his every move. As the representative of Earth, he was expected to play the part of the obedient diplomat. But something about the princess, something about her uncertainty, kept him from doing what the others expected. Commander Harris, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Thalrax, the lead Athery delegate, who had spoken earlier. He stood tall, his skin a dark purple shade, and his expression unreadable. The princess is waiting. Shall we begin? Jack nodded, forcing himself to focus on the task ahead. The dinner was not just a meal. It was a delicate performance, a way for the Athery to measure whether Earth was truly worthy of an alliance. The stakes were high, and Jack knew he had to make a strong impression. As he approached Sarith, the room seemed to quiet down. All eyes were on them now. She looked up at him with a slight smile, but her eyes were full of tension. The princess looked as if she had been dreading this moment all along. It was clear she didn't want to be here, surrounded by her people who expected her to play the role of a perfect princess. Commander Harris, she said softly, bowing her head slightly. It is good to see you again. Jack smiled back, trying to hide the growing sense of unease. Princess Sarith, it's a pleasure to see you as well. I'm sure this evening will go smoothly. Sarith didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked away, as though unsure of what to say. Jack followed her gaze to the other Athery delegates, who were watching them closely. Their eyes were sharp, waiting for any sign of weakness or hesitation. This was no ordinary dinner. It was a test. As they sat at the long, polished table, the tension grew. The meal was served by a team of mechanical servants who moved silently through the room. The food was unfamiliar to Jack: alien fruits, exotic meats, and strange, colorful liquids that shimmered in the light. But he forced himself to take a bite, knowing that any sign of discomfort would be seen as a weakness. For the next hour, The conversation around the table was polite but filled with veiled challenges. The other delegates spoke of galactic history, economic concerns, and the future of the galaxy. Jack did his best to keep up, offering insights about Earth's potential role in the future, but it was clear the Aetheri weren't really listening. They were watching for something else. Jack felt Sereth's gaze on him again. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "You're doing well," she whispered, though her face remained composed. "But it's more than just diplomacy, isn't it?" Jack turned toward her slightly, keeping his voice equally soft. "What do you mean?" She hesitated before answering, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "They're watching us. Every move, every word. They want to see if we connect." Jack's brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't speak. Sareth's words had caught him off guard. He had known the stakes were high, but he hadn't realized how deeply personal this was for her. She was being watched, judged not just as a princess, but as a symbol of her people's future. "I'm not sure I can do this," she admitted quietly, almost as if she were talking to herself. "It feels wrong, but my people are counting on me. They expect me to succeed." Jack met her gaze again, feeling a strange mix of sympathy and admiration. He had faced pressure before, on the battlefield, in the face of overwhelming odds. But he had never had the weight of an entire civilization's future resting on his shoulders. He couldn't imagine the burden she was carrying. "You're stronger than you know," he said quietly, hoping his words would comfort her. "I know it doesn't feel like it, but you're doing what needs to be done. And you don't have to do it alone." Sareth's eyes softened for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. The dinner continued, and the conversation shifted to more formal matters. But Jack could see the way Sareth's shoulders had relaxed just a bit, as if his words had given her a small sense of relief. The evening passed slowly, and Jack could feel the eyes of the other delegates on him, testing his every word and action. But for the first time, he wasn't just playing a role. He wasn't just following orders. He was helping Sereth, supporting her in a way that was beginning to feel more real than any political alliance could ever be. As the night wore on, Jack realized something. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It was about two people from different worlds, trying to find a way to survive in a galaxy that was more complicated than either of them had ever imagined. The days following Jack and Sereth's conversation felt strange. The tension between them had shifted, no longer about the ritual but about finding a way to navigate their uncertain future. Both of them were trying to find a way to redefine the bond between their people. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. Jack sat in the command center of the ship, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy in front of him. The Aetheri fleet was still hovering near Earth's orbit, and the pressure of the upcoming summit with the Galactic Council hung over him. Time was running out, and the alliance with the Aetheri was still a fragile thing. They needed something concrete, a solution, a new plan, before it was too late. A soft chime broke his concentration. His communicator screen lit up, and a message flashed on the display. "Princess Sereth." He clicked the message open. "Meet me in the garden chamber. There's something we need to discuss." Jack felt a slight sense of unease. He hadn't seen Sereth much since their last conversation. He had spent most of his time in meetings, trying to push for diplomatic progress, while she had been working with her advisors. The weight of their decision hung heavily between them. Without hesitation, Jack stood up and made his way to the garden chamber, a beautiful, serene space filled with bioluminescent plants that glowed softly in the dim light. The air was fresh, and the sound of flowing water from a nearby fountain added to the peaceful atmosphere. Yet, in the midst of this tranquility, Jack knew there was a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Sereth was already there, standing near a small pond. She was looking out over the water, her back turned to Jack when he arrived. He could tell that she was deep in thought. "Princess," Jack said, his voice gentle but firm. "You wanted to talk." Sereth turned to face him, her expression more serious than he had ever seen. She looked as if she had made a difficult decision. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about finding another way. You were right. There has to be a way to forge an alliance without following the same old rituals." Jack took a step closer. "I'm glad you're considering it. We both know this ritual is not the only way forward, but it's going to take a lot of work to change the minds of the Council and your people." Sarith nodded. "I know, but there's something you don't understand, Commander. The Athari people, we don't just follow tradition because it's convenient. We follow it because it's been passed down for centuries. If I go against it, I risk losing the support of my own people. They'll see me as weak." Jack looked at her with empathy. "I understand that, but you don't have to sacrifice yourself to keep their support. You have a voice. You're the one leading them. It's your choice how to move forward." She paused, her golden eyes locking onto his. "And if I fail? If this doesn't work? What happens to Earth? What happens to you?" Jack met her gaze steadily. "We won't fail. I believe in us. And I believe that if we fight together, we can change the future for both our people." A heavy silence fell between them. For a moment, the weight of the situation seemed too much to bear. Yet, Jack felt something shift in the air. There was a determination in Sarith's eyes that hadn't been there before. She had always been a leader, but now, he could see she was starting to believe that there might be another way. Finally, Sarith spoke, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "I've decided to take a risk. I'm going to address the Council directly. Tell them that we need a new approach, a new way of working with Earth. I'll tell them that we don't need the ritual to solidify our alliance. We need cooperation and mutual respect." Jack's heart skipped a beat. This was bold, risky even, but he admired her courage. She was willing to risk everything for what she believed in. "That's a huge step," Jack said, his voice soft with admiration. "But if you do this, you'll need my support. I'll stand with you. I believe in this too." Sarith smiled, a small but genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I knew I wasn't alone in this." For the first time, Jack felt a sense of partnership. They were both taking a risk, but it was a risk that could change everything. It wasn't just about two nations trying to find common ground. It was about two people working together to create something better, something that didn't rely on outdated traditions that kept them bound in fear. The next day, Jack and Sarith stood before the Athari Council in the grand hall of the capital ship. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The council members, all older, powerful figures, looked down on them with skeptical eyes. Their long robes shimmered in the light, but their faces were cold. Sarith stood tall, her eyes fixed ahead as she addressed them. "We stand at a crossroads," she began, her voice strong and clear. "I understand that our traditions have held us together for millennia, but the future requires something more. We need to build alliances based on mutual respect, not rituals that bind us to the past. And I believe Earth is the partner we need to secure our future, not as a subject, but as equals." The room was silent. The council exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. Jack could feel the weight of their scrutiny, but he remained steady, standing beside Sarith. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Thalrax, the oldest member of the council, spoke. "Princess Sarith has shown courage," he said, his voice gravely. "Perhaps it is time to change." The room erupted into whispers. Jack felt a surge of hope. This wasn't over yet, but it was the beginning of something new. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Jack Harris stood beside Princess Sarith, watching as the Athari Council deliberated in hushed voices. Their long robes and stern expressions gave nothing away, but Jack could feel the weight of their judgment. This was the moment that could change everything for Earth and the Athari. Sarith had taken a bold step. She had defied her people's traditions and called for a new way forward, one that didn't rely on the ancient ritual that was meant to bond her with an Earth ambassador. Now, the council was deciding whether to accept her vision for the future or to reject it and fall back into the old ways. The silence was deafening. Princess Sarith, Thalrax, the eldest member of the council, spoke at last, his voice deep and commanding. You stand before us with a proposal that challenges the very foundations of Athari tradition. You suggest we abandon the bonding ritual and create an alliance based on cooperation. Do you believe Earth is truly capable of such an alliance? Sarith stood tall, her back straight, and her expression unwavering. Jack couldn't help but admire her strength. She had always been a leader, but now, in this moment, she was something more, a symbol of change. I do, Sarith replied firmly. I have seen Earth's potential. Commander Harris has shown that humans are capable of working with us, not through rituals, but through true partnership. I believe this is the future we need. The room was silent for a moment. The council members exchanged quiet whispers, their faces unreadable. Jack could feel the weight of their decision bearing down on him. If they rejected Sarith's proposal, the alliance would crumble, and with it, any hope of future cooperation between their two species. Finally, Thalrax spoke again. You are our princess, Sarith. It is your duty to guide us. But this is a significant departure from what we have known for millennia. I cannot promise that this will be an easy road. Jack's heart raced. The council had been hesitant to accept change before, and he feared they might not be ready to take the leap now. But Sarith had put herself on the line for this. She was risking everything: the future of her people, her own position, and the fragile hope of peace between their species. I understand the weight of this decision, Sarith said, her voice steady. But I also understand that we cannot remain stagnant. We must evolve. The future of the Athari, and the future of our alliance with Earth, depends on us stepping forward together. There was another long pause. Jack could see the conflict in the eyes of the council members. They were torn between tradition and the undeniable truth that the galaxy was changing. They had watched Earth rise from a fledgling species to one capable of challenging the great powers of the galaxy. Could they afford to turn their backs on such potential? Then, to Jack's surprise, one of the council members, a younger Athari named Kivrin, stood up. His voice was calm but filled with conviction. I have been watching Earth for some time. The humans have shown us their courage and intelligence. I believe they are ready to stand by our side. The princess speaks wisely. It is time to build a future, not on old traditions, but on mutual respect. Jack's eyes widened. He hadn't expected support from Kivrin. Most of the council had been resistant to change, but here was someone who was willing to speak out. It was a glimmer of hope, no matter how small. Thalrax looked at Kivrin with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. You speak boldly, young one, but change comes with risks. Are you prepared to face those risks? Kivrin nodded firmly. Yes, we must be prepared to face them, or we risk losing everything. For a moment, Jack thought the room might erupt into chaos. But then, another voice, this time from a female council member named Lorraine, spoke up. I have watched the humans closely as well. Their strength and adaptability are undeniable. Perhaps we should listen to our princess and take a step into the future, rather than clinging to the past. The room fell quiet as the council members exchanged glances, and Jack held his breath. This was the moment of truth. Would the Athari Council follow the path of tradition, or would they trust Sarith's vision for a new alliance? Thalrax finally stood up, his presence commanding the room. Very well, he said, his voice grave. We will support the princess's vision. But let it be clear, the path ahead will not be easy. There will be those among our people who will resist. The old ways die hard. We will need to work together, not just with the humans, but within our own ranks. A sense of relief washed over Jack. It was done. The Athari Council had agreed to Sarith's proposal. They would forge an alliance with Earth based on cooperation, not ritual. Sarith gave a small, relieved smile. Thank you, Thalrax. I know this won't be easy. But together, We can build something stronger than tradition. We can build a future. Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This was it. A new chapter had begun. The alliance between Earth and the Aetheri was no longer just a political formality. It was a genuine partnership, one built on mutual respect and a shared vision for the future. As the council members began to leave, Jack turned to Sirith, his voice filled with admiration. "You did it. You've changed everything." Sirith smiled, but her eyes were filled with determination. "We've changed everything. Together." The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Jack believed they were heading toward something better, something that neither tradition nor fear could stop. The decision had been made. The Aetheri Council had agreed to Princess Sirith's proposal, and the alliance between Earth and the Aetheri was now official. The path forward, though uncertain, was full of promise. But the journey was far from over. Jack Harris stood on the balcony of his quarters, overlooking the vast expanse of stars. The planet Earth seemed like a distant memory now, so far away in the grand scheme of the galaxy. Yet, the weight of his responsibilities had never felt heavier. He had played a crucial role in this new alliance, but it wasn't just politics that had changed. Something deeper, something personal, had shifted between him and Sirith. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. Jack turned to find Sirith standing in the doorway, her golden eyes filled with a quiet determination. She had come to speak to him, as she often did, but today felt different. There was a sense of finality in the air. "Commander Harris," she greeted him with a small, formal bow. "We have a lot to discuss, but first, I wanted to thank you. I don't think I could have done this without you." Jack smiled, though there was a heaviness in his chest. "I didn't do much. You were the one who took the real risk. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't even be here." Sirith stepped closer, her gaze steady. "We both know that this alliance is more than just politics. It's about trust. And I trust you, Jack. I didn't realize it before, but I do now." Jack's heart skipped a beat. There was something unspoken in her words, something that made him feel like everything they had worked for was not just for the future of their people, but for something much more personal. "I trust you too, Sirith," he said quietly. For a long moment, they stood there, words left unspoken but understood. The bond between them was undeniable now. It had started with necessity, an alliance forged out of survival, but it had grown into something more. They had learned to rely on each other, not just as representatives of their species, but as individuals who shared a common purpose. Sirith finally broke the silence. "The next step is critical. We have to present our new plan to the Galactic Council. The entire galaxy will be watching us, Jack. If we succeed, it will change the way the entire galaxy looks at alliances. But if we fail..." Jack nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The eyes of the galaxy were indeed on them. But he had confidence in Sirith. She had shown courage before, and she would do so again. "We won't fail," he said firmly. "You've already proven that you're a leader who isn't afraid to change things for the better. That's the future we're building. And the humans will stand beside you, just like I will." Sirith gave him a small smile, her eyes bright with determination. Together. Later that day, the Galactic Council convened, and the room was filled with representatives from countless species, all eager to hear what the Aetheri and Earth had to say. Jack and Sirith stood side by side, ready to address the galaxy's most powerful leaders. The atmosphere was tense as the two of them stepped forward. The council members, seated in their high chairs, watched with wary eyes. The old ways were strong and change was always met with resistance, but Sirith had already taken a stand. Now, it was time to see if the rest of the galaxy was ready to follow. "We stand here today to propose a new kind of alliance," Sirith began, her voice strong and steady. "An alliance based not on rituals or power, but on mutual respect and cooperation. The Aetheri and Earth will work together, not as separate entities, but as equals. We share the same goals: peace, prosperity, and the advancement of all species. Jack stood beside her, watching the council's reaction carefully. There were whispers among the members, their expressions skeptical but intrigued. It was a big step, but it was one they had to take. "This is more than just a political alliance," Jack added. "This is a promise of trust between our peoples. We may come from different worlds, but we are united in our desire for a better future." For a moment, there was silence. Then, one by one, the council members began to speak, their voices filled with doubt and curiosity. But as the discussion went on, it became clear that the idea was beginning to take hold. One by one, the members started to agree. The idea of an alliance built on trust rather than rituals was appealing. Finally, Thalrax, the leader of the council, stood. His voice rang out, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "Princess Sarith, Commander Harris, your proposal is bold, but it has merit. We will approve this new alliance. The Aetheri and Earth will work together, as equals, for the future of the galaxy." A wave of relief washed over Jack. It was done. The future was secured. After the meeting, as the two of them left the council chambers, Sarith turned to Jack, her face soft with relief and gratitude. "We did it. We've changed everything." Jack smiled, his heart light. "No, we didn't change everything. We just started a new chapter." Together, they had built something stronger than a mere alliance. They had forged a future based on trust, cooperation, and mutual respect, a future that would forever shape the destiny of both the Aetheri and humanity. And as they looked toward the stars, Jack knew that this was only the beginning of something far greater than either of them could have imagined. The night of the diplomatic banquet had passed, but the tension between Commander Jack Harris and Princess Sarith still hung in the air. As the final meal course had ended and the guests dispersed to their chambers, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something important had shifted. He hadn't been just another human ambassador anymore. He had become part of something much larger, a part of Sarith's struggle. The following morning, Jack stood at the windows of his quarters, staring out at the vastness of space. His mind wandered back to the conversation he had shared with Sarith. The princess had been open in a way he hadn't expected. She had confessed her doubts, her fears, and it had left Jack wondering just how much of her role she controlled and how much she was forced into it. He turned away from the window and he heard the soft chime of his door. "Come in," he called out, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. The door slid open, and there she was again, Princess Sarith. Her silver hair flowed down her back like a waterfall, and her eyes, those deep golden eyes, held a mixture of uncertainty and determination. She stepped into the room quietly, her gaze not meeting his at first. "Good morning, Commander," she said, her voice soft yet formal, as though putting on a mask once again. "I hope you slept well." Jack gave a small nod, still unsure of what to make of their last encounter. "I did, thank you. But I sense you didn't come here just to ask about my sleep." Sarith hesitated, her posture stiffening. She clasped her hands in front of her, as though bracing herself for something difficult. "I didn't," she admitted. "There's something I need to say, Commander. Something I've been thinking about all night." Jack stood up, the concern creeping into his voice. "What is it, Princess?" Sarith took a deep breath, her golden eyes lifting to meet his. "The ritual, the bond between our people, the one we are supposed to complete. It is not as simple as it seems. You already know this. But what you don't know is that there's more to it. The bond forged in this ritual can either make or break an alliance, and I am worried about what will happen to us if things don't go according to plan." Jack's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? You've been very clear about what's expected. We simply need to go through with it for the alliance to be successful." Sarith stepped closer, lowering her voice. "It's not just about a ritual, Commander. The bond we share that night, the connection, it's real. If I let it happen, if I allow myself to become too involved, it will change things, forever, between us." Between our people. Jack blinked, trying to absorb what she was saying. He could feel the weight of her words, and the gravity of the situation pressed down on him even more. Was this ritual truly that powerful? Could something as simple as a shared night truly create a lasting bond that would affect both their lives? I don't want this to be just a political game, Sarith continued, her voice growing more urgent. I don't want to be forced into something I don't fully understand. And I don't want you to be part of it, either. It's not fair to you. Jack took a step forward, his expression softening. I never wanted this to be a game. Sarith, I'm just trying to do what's best for Earth, for our future. And if I'm honest, I'm beginning to see that you're in a much harder position than I thought. Sarith met his gaze, her eyes filled with gratitude yet still heavy with concern. But you don't understand. If we do this, if we complete the ritual, we're bound to each other. Not just for a night, but for the future of both our peoples. If things don't go the way my people expect, I'll be branded as a failure. I'll lose everything. My title, my authority, my future. Jack's heart ached for her. He had always known that his role in this alliance was important, but hearing it from Sarith made it so much more real. She wasn't just a princess. She was a leader, one who was being forced into a role that could break her spirit if it went wrong. He paused for a moment, considering his next words carefully. I don't want to see you lose everything. And I won't allow Earth's future to be held hostage by a tradition that only causes harm. But I can't pretend this isn't going to change things. If we go through with this ritual, it will change everything between us. There's no going back. Sarith bit her lip, clearly torn. I know, she whispered. But what choice do I have? I'm the only one who can lead my people forward. If I fail here, it could mean the end of everything. I'm not ready for that. Jack's mind was racing. This was bigger than anything he had anticipated. This wasn't just a ritual, it was a decision. A decision that could not only affect the future of the Athery, but the future of humanity as well. Maybe there's a way to change things, Jack said, his voice firm. Maybe we don't have to follow the old rules. Maybe we can find a different path, one that keeps the spirit of unity, but doesn't force us into something we're both unsure about. Sarith's eyes widened, as though she hadn't considered that option. For a brief moment, the mask she had worn so tightly seemed to slip. Hope flickered in her gaze. Do you think that could work? Jack nodded slowly, a determined expression on his face. I'm willing to try, if you are. The princess hesitated for a moment longer, then gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then let's find another way. For the first time since he'd entered the Athery ship, Jack felt a sense of optimism. He didn't know what path they would take next, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to leave Sarith to face this alone. And together, they might just find a way to reshape the future of both their peoples.